Natural Disasters, Avalanches and Landslides by Jane Walker. Introduction. A huge mass of snow, rock, or mud crashes down from a mountain or hillside at high speed. It can engulf and destroy entire towns and villages in just a few minutes. With a thunderous roar, avalanches and landslides strike quickly, often without warning, and their impact can be catastrophic. Hundreds of avalanches occur each day on remote snowy mountaintops throughout the world. However, their effect is only really felt in the populated mountain regions. Here, the whirling mass of ice and snow will crush to death or bury alive any person or animal unlucky enough to be caught in its path. The introduction of improved warning systems can reduce the effects of avalanches and landslides, but we must also try to control the human activities that can trigger these natural disasters. Although the term avalanche can mean the fall of any material, snow, soil, rocks, ice, or volcanic lava, it generally refers to a falling mass of snow. Dry snow avalanches can travel at speeds of up to 225 miles an hour. The melting snow of a wet snow avalanche moves more slowly at about 25 miles per hour. New snow layer. Dry snow avalanche. The force of a dry snow avalanche can equal that of a hurricane. As the powdery snow hurtles downhill, a destructive blast of air may be sent out ahead of the avalanche. Direction of powder, air blast. Wet snow avalanche. Wet snow avalanches also often begin in rocky areas. Here, the snow melts around rocks that have warmed up in the sunshine. The fresh, wet snow can set hard like concrete when the avalanche finally comes to a halt. Slab avalanche. As a slab avalanche hurls itself down a slope, the front of the slab starts to break up. Slab avalanches usually occur on slopes that are protected from the wind, where the snow collects in deep piles. What is an avalanche? An avalanche is a huge mass of ice and snow that breaks away from the side of a mountain and surges downward at great speed. The greatest avalanches probably occur on the high peaks of the Himalayas. However, those that cause the highest death toll fall in the populated valleys of the Alps. Scientists have grouped avalanches into three main kinds: wet snow avalanche, dry snow avalanche, and slab avalanche. Wet snow avalanches usually occur in the spring when the loose melting snow forms into large boulders of snow as it rolls downhill. More deadly are the dry snow avalanches that either slide along close to the ground or lift off the ground completely and swirl through the air, often hundreds of feet high. In a slab avalanche, a huge chunk of solid, sticky snow breaks away from the slope. It slides across a layer of loose snow crystals lying beneath the surface. An avalanche begins. Most avalanches begin either during or soon after a snowstorm. As each new layer of snow settles on the ground, it binds itself to the existing layers that are anchored to the mountainside. The additional weight of a heavy snowfall can prevent the snow from gripping onto the layers of snow underneath and trigger an avalanche. Avalanches also occur during the spring when the melting snow seeps through the surface. This creates a slippery layer on which the snow can slide. The steepness of the slope can affect the speed of the avalanche. Steep, rocky slopes help to anchor the snow. The smooth surface of gentler, grass-covered slopes allow the avalanche to reach great speeds. Avalanches are not only caused by natural factors, such as the amount and quality of snow, or the sudden arrival of strong winds. Once conditions are suitable, an avalanche can be started by the slightest movement, such as a falling icicle or twig, or by a small animal crossing a slope. As an avalanche shoots downhill, it bounces off the sides of the mountain valley, creating clouds of icy snow dust. The White Death. When an avalanche strikes, more than 1 million cubic feet of snow and ice blast down a mountainside. As the ice mass falls, it collects large amounts of debris, such as rocks and tree stumps, on its way. In a populated area, whole villages are crushed, hundreds of people and animals are buried alive, power and water supplies are cut off, and roads and railroad lines disappear, all in a matter of minutes. The world's greatest single avalanche disaster occurred in 1962 in Peru. More than 3,500 people died, and 8 villages and towns were destroyed in just 7 minutes. When the avalanche finally came to rest after a journey of 9 miles, the pile of snow and ice was over 60 feet deep. Trapped under the hard-packed snow, an avalanche victim can barely move and is unlikely to survive more than a couple of hours. Victims die from cold, a lack of oxygen, or from the injuries that occurred when they were first struck. Only about 5% of all avalanche victims are rescued alive. In this mountain village, a path has been cut through the wall of snow and debris caused by a recent avalanche. The 1962 avalanche disaster in Peru occurred when a huge chunk of ice and snow broke off the country's tallest mountain, Nevado de Huascarán. The avalanche roared downhill at speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, demolishing nearby villages with a deluge of mud and ice over 78 feet thick. The Alps. Each year, tens of thousands of avalanches occur in the European Alps, the world's most densely populated mountain region. The inhabitants of numerous alpine towns and villages live under a constant threat of avalanches, which is made worse by certain natural conditions that prevail there. The warm, dry foehn wind that blows deep through the alpine valley raises temperatures suddenly, causing the snow to melt rapidly. The smooth surface of the alpine meadows lubricates the path of the avalanches, which travel at terrifying speeds. In 1898, an avalanche at Garmisch in Switzerland raced downhill at around 250 miles per hour. During the 1950 to 1951 Winter of Terror in Switzerland, over 1,100 avalanches killed a total of 98 people. The Alps stretch for about 750 miles through 7 countries, including France, Italy, and Switzerland. The area of the French and Italian Alps, shown here, is one of the most popular skiing regions in the world. More and more people visit the Alps each year, increasing the likelihood of avalanche fatalities. In 1999, the 2 ski resort villages of Valzor and Galtier in Switzerland were swamped by deadly avalanches. 38 people died and 20,000 holiday makers were stranded for over a week. Avalanche warning signs, such as the one shown above, inform skiers if there is a danger of avalanches. The ski trails, called pistes, that are at risk are then closed. Experienced skiers who choose to ski off-piste on unmarked trails run the risk of setting off an avalanche. The weight of a single skier on a slope can open up a crack in the hard crust on the snow's surface. This releases a huge slab that breaks away, often at a point above the skier, offering little chance of escape. What are landslides? A landslide is the name given to downhill movement of large quantities of soil, mud, rocks, and other kinds of debris. There are 3 main kinds of landslides: falls, slides, and flows. In a rockfall, huge boulders crash down a steep slope, often breaking up into smaller pieces on reaching the ground. When rock slides occur, the chunks of rocky material slide over the ground as quickly as flowing water. Debris slides that consist of thin layers of loose soil and smaller rocks travel in the same way. Mud flows and earth flows are wet landslides. A mass of mud and water flows down from the upper slopes, picking up debris lying in its path. Slump. A slump occurs when a heavy rock and soil on a steep slope or cliff collapses in a series of curving movements. The blocks of slumped material tilt back toward the slope. Rock slide. Rock slides involve the downward movement of rock, debris, or large blocks of rock. They often occur after heavy rains and in areas where large numbers of trees have been removed from the slopes. Mudflow. Mudflows are the most liquid kind of landslide. They occur in mountainous regions, desert areas, and on steep-sided volcanoes. They occur after heavy rains and can travel at speeds of up to 56 miles per hour. Rockfall. A rockfall occurs when rocks descend at high speed, often falling freely through the air down a steep slope or cliff face. The rocks may have been loosened by frost or ice. On reaching the lower slopes, a rockfall may break up into a moving torrent of debris. The San Salvador mudslide. In January 2001, an earthquake hit Central America. It caused a landslide that buried a suburb of El Salvador's capital city, San Salvador. A 1,600-foot landslide swamped the suburb of Las Colinas. 1,200 people died or are missing, and hundreds of houses, cars, and streets were lost beneath the mud. Landslide causes. A landslide begins when the loose material on the surface of a slope becomes unstable. Water is one of the key factors in triggering landslides. After heavy rainfall or melting snow, the surface becomes saturated. Water seeps through the top layer, making the layers underneath very slippery. The water increases the weight of the surface material, soil, small rocks, and sediment, and weakens the forces that bind it. As the soil loses its grip on the slope, it can no longer resist the downward pull of gravity. On steep slopes, the water-filled mass forms into a slide. On gentler slopes, it becomes a flow of earth and debris. Erosion where the lowest part of a slope is cut or torn away is another major cause of landslides. Erosion can result from natural factors, such as the action of the sea and rivers, or from artificial ones, such as mining and excavating. A landslide itself could be a major force of erosion, especially on steep slopes where the tree cover has been removed. Landslides are also associated with earthquakes and volcanic activity. After the devastating earthquake of 1964 in Alaska, much of the destruction results from landslides. In the Trishuli Valley in Nepal, the soil has been eroded from the steep mountainsides. This erosion is partly due to tree felling operations in the area. A landslide has torn away the ground from beneath the houses in Antofagasta, Chile. They are left clinging to the scarp or cliff formed by the side. Volcanic landslides. On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens volcano in the Cascade Range of Washington state erupted violently, following an earthquake beneath the volcano. As steam, hot gases, and other volcanic material shot out from the volcano, the shock waves from the earthquake triggered off two enormous landslides on the northern side of Mount St. Helens. The falling rocks mixed with the melting snow and ice and the ash and dust from the volcano to form a kind of mud flow called lahar. The name lahar originally referred to a volcanic mudflow in Indonesia, but it is now used to describe volcanic mudflows anywhere in the world. Advanced warnings had led to the evacuation of the area around Mount St. Helens, but 5 years later, the inhabitants of Armero and other towns and villages lying in the shadow of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano in Colombia were not so fortunate. In November 1985, a violent eruption of the volcano left around 25,000 people dead and 25,000 more without shelter. The mudflow from the volcano eventually covered an area of more than 15 square miles. It destroyed valuable farmlands of this rice and coffee growing area. A lahar or volcanic mudflow can travel over great distances at high speed. Heat from inside the volcano helps melt the snow and ice on its slopes. The water mixes with loose material on the volcano's slopes to form a massive tongue of mud. Several weeks before the earthquake, Mount St. Helens showed signs of increasing volcanic activity. A large bulge that had appeared on the volcano's northern side was torn apart by the power of the eruption. Clouds of ash and dust poured into the atmosphere. Following the 1985 eruption of Nevado del Ruiz, torrents of mud raced through the streets of Armero at around 100 miles per hour. Cars were swept away, trees were uprooted, and many of the town's inhabitants were engulfed by the tide. Disaster strikes. When a landslide begins its descent, huge quantities of soil, mud, rocks, and smaller debris hurtle down a hillside. Whole villages are buried, and their inhabitants and livestock are swept along on a tide of mud and debris. Trees are uprooted, houses are flattened or swamped, and communications are cut off. The mountainous regions of Nepal and Asia are prone to torrential rains. Here, the water-saturated soil has been eroded, exposing layers of rock beneath. This erosion is worse in areas where large numbers of trees have been cut down. The hillsides are stripped of protection against the falling rain, and of tree roots to anchor the soil in place. Landslides glide over the smooth rock at speeds of up to 65 feet per second. Following an earthquake in the Andes Mountains in Peru in 1970, a devastating mudflow swept through the Peruvian town of Yungay. Almost 18,000 people were buried alive as a giant wave of mud and debris, about 260 feet high, swamped the town. In 1969, in the area around Los Angeles, almost 44 inches of rain fell in just 42 days. These rains, some of the heaviest ever recorded in the area, washed down mud and gravel from the San Gabriel Mountains. As a swirling torrent of mud, debris, and water swept over the suburb of Glendora, over 100 people were drowned and 15,000 people had to evacuate their homes. The landslide also blocked the main highway into Los Angeles. In 1999, torrential rains triggered massive landslides in Mount Avila, Venezuela. Tons of debris thundered down into the capital Caracas, burying thousands of people. When the water-filled Casita volcano collapsed in Nicaragua in 1998, a wave of mud killed 2,000 people. Vaillant, Italy, 1963. During the night of October 9, 1963, millions of tons of rock slid down from Mount Toc in Italy into the Vaillant Reservoir below. 3 years previously, one of the highest arch dams was built below the mountain. Engineers working on the dam had noted that when the water level in the reservoir rose, a rocky mass on the mountainside moved downward. As the water level increased, so did the rate at which the mast moved. Heavy rains swelled the reservoir, and the engineers tried to halt the rate of rock movement by lowering the water level. But the rock slide could not be stopped. At 10:41 p.m., a torrent of rocks, mud, and water raced across the wide river valley and up the opposite slope. As it fell back into the reservoir, a 330-foot-high wave was catapulted over the 850-foot wall of the Vaillant Dam into the valley below. The map above shows the area around the Vaillant Dam. The dark green shaded area represents the extent of the flooding. The dark blue shading shows how much of the reservoir was filled by debris from the landslide. The diagram below shows how the valley of the Vaillant Reservoir before and after the landslide. In 1960, a landslide fell into the southern end of the reservoir. There is also evidence of a prehistoric landslide near Casso. Within 2 minutes of the rockslide, a flood of water was racing through the narrow valley toward the villages of Parago and Villanova. It then devastated Longeron, where most of the inhabitants died. A total of 2,600 people perished that night. Looking back, evidence of avalanches and landslides dating back to prehistoric times can still be seen today. On the floor of the Sidmara Valley in western Iran lie the remains of a landslide that scientists believe occurred over 2,000 years ago. Limestone debris covers an area of around 77 square miles and is around 980 feet deep in places. In 218 BC, Hannibal and his army suffered great losses from avalanches as they crossed the Alps on their way from Carthage to attack Rome. It was October, and fresh snow had fallen on a crust of old snow. Thousands of troops and animals were carried away by the avalanches, triggered off as they crossed the unstable crust. In the Middle Ages, pilgrims from northern Italy regularly crossed the Alps on their way to worship in Rome. Many believed that avalanches were acts of God, while others thought they showed the destructive power of the devil. On the morning of Christmas Day, 1839, a gaping hole appeared up in the top of the cliffs at Bindon in Devon, England. A vast chunk of rock sank down, leaving an enormous gap about 3,900 feet long and 300 feet wide. The steep slope down which the landslide moved is still visible today, as are the huge lumps of displaced rock. During the winters of the First World War, 1914 to 1918, an estimated 60,000 soldiers fighting in the Alps were killed by avalanches. Some of these avalanches were not entirely due to natural causes. After a heavy snowfall, Austrian and Italian troops often fired into the slopes above the enemy below. This action released huge dry snow avalanches. It was the first time in military history that avalanches had been used as a weapon. Are we causing more? We cannot prevent natural disasters such as avalanches and landslides. Yet, we can stop or reduce the human activities that make it more likely that one of these powerful forces will strike. When large numbers of trees are cut down to provide fuel, timber, or land for farming, nothing remains to trap the rainwater and hold the surface of the slopes in place. This deforestation also removes the natural barrier to avalanches and landslides that trees and other vegetation provide. Mountainous areas throughout the world are often cleared and developed as tourist resorts. Millions of people then visit the mountains to sightsee and explore. These activities can wear away the soil and vegetation, making the area more prone to avalanches and landslides. The threat of landslides and avalanches is increased by excavation and construction work, and by the removal of natural resources from the ground. The shape of a slope may be steepened or altered to such an extent that it becomes unstable. Heavy rains and snow add further weight to the slope, weakening the soil's grip on the hillside. Forest fires. A lack of hillside vegetation is blamed for the mud flows that are common in parts of Southern California. Forest fires destroy the trees and shrubs on the steep slopes around many residential areas. After heavy rains, the topsoil becomes saturated with water and starts to slip downhill. What can we do? Many different measures can be taken to reduce the devastating impact of an avalanche or landslide. In the Alps, controls include setting off explosives to release avalanches artificially and planting triangular patches of trees above the mountain villages. Anti-avalanche constructions, such as trees, fences, or barriers, are used to hold the snow in place, slow down, deflect, or break up an avalanche. Water is one of the prime causes of landslides. Measures can be taken to control and monitor the amount and pressure of water in unstable slopes. Underground drainage is also installed in some places to reduce the water content in landslide-prone hillsides. To lower the lower end or toe of a slide can be shored up with concrete or soil. In the United States, scientists are using computers to try and forecast avalanches. The study of volcanoes can also help predict volcanic eruptions more accurately, thus reducing the death toll from volcanic mud flows. Avalanche fences have been erected on these slopes in the Valais region of Switzerland. They help keep the snow in place so that no avalanche can form. In addition to erecting
Sure, here's a custom mix just for you.
Echo, stop. Echo, stop. Improved warning and evacuation systems also help reduce the loss of life from these disasters. Landslide prevention involves the use of trenches, pumps, and wells to control water levels. New developments should be located in areas where the land is stable or where the slopes can be supported.